It's the last day before Thanksgiving break. Whee! Anywho, this is in case you missed it for Tuesday, November 24th. And if you're watching this, that means you weren't in class today. So I hope you are well, and I hope those around you are well. So find a good way to celebrate these next 5 days, relax, stay, socially distance and all that good stuff, and, behave yourself, but get some rest. You deserve it. I'm going to go through the couple of slides we're going to do today here with you guys, give you a few reminders toward the end or toward the beginning here, and then, you can move on with your day. So the reminders, if you owe any late work, please make sure you're getting that in. I don't want you to do history over break, but if you're behind, man, you got to do something to get yourself caught up at some point. So do make sure that you are taking care of business, okay? And that same tip, I am going to be sending out emails on Monday to families with everything you're missing, everything you're behind in. So don't be surprised if you're behind, if all of a sudden someone's asking you why you haven't done X, Y, and Z things. The assignment that we got yesterday, Closing the Frontier, is going to be due Monday. I think it's the 30th by midnight. Again, I'm going to try to give you guys, again, some time today to work on that. So if you have time planned in your day, please make sure and put some time into that, okay? Today what we're going to do is we're going to look at how the Transcontinental Railroad was built. And I'm clicking all over the place. There we go. Look at how the Transcontinental Railroad was built, and we're going to talk about how Latinos lost their land in the Southwest. Another reminder that the Oregon Trail Challenge that we're doing, which no one has submitted their thing yet because apparently nobody in this class wants to lose, is due by 3 o'clock. If you want to enter, play the Oregon Trail, take a screenshot of your final score and see if it is better than the score that I get this afternoon when I play. I'm gonna start playing about 1 o'clock, I think is the plan. And I'll take a picture of that final score and I'll post in class so you can see how you did. Okay. All right. So that's playing. Here we go. 2 slides we got to do. All right. So this first one looks like there's a lot going on, and there is. Basically, what we're going to talk about here is we're going to talk about how transportation changes the West. We talked about Manifest Destiny yesterday, and we said one of the things that you have to do is you have to be able to, settle and populate the area. Well, in order to do that and do that more effectively, you have to be able to get people out there more efficiently. You have to be able to get them out there safe. The covered wagon, while it got a lot of people out to the west, it wasn't exactly the safest option. It was expensive, and it took a really long time. Yesterday in class, we talked about how getting from New York to California roughly took 6 months if you were moving well, and obviously your chances of death, from disease, injury, things like that were not going to say high, but they're pretty good. And then you had the things that happened, like the Donner Party, where the wagon train got caught in the mountains and they got snowed in and turned to cannibalism for food. You've got some pretty horrifying stories. And so in the 1860s, the government makes the decision that they set a goal to build a transcontinental railroad. Now, if you're unfamiliar with that word transcontinental, continent is obviously a landmass. Trans means across. And so they want to build a railroad that goes across the country, that connects the east to the west. Now, the thing you need to understand is they didn't need to build. I'm moving my X cross here across the screen. They didn't need to build railroads over here. And the reason for that is railroads already existed in that part of the country. There were thousands of miles of railroad. You could get from New York to Chicago. You could get from New York to Atlanta, Boston to Atlanta, Philadelphia to Chicago, all different places. And so what the government did is they focused in the 1862 Pacific Railway Act on approving the language, the money, and getting the land to build a railroad that would go from the eastern border of Nebraska all the way into California, Sacramento. Okay. Now, obviously, this didn't go without great planning. And so the government sent out this guy named Theodore Judah. His nickname was Crazy Judah because he took on some tasks in engineering that were considered to be impossible. Judah considered the plotting of this Transcontinental Railroad to be his biggest accomplishment. So he took a team of men out west and basically surveyed the land and plotted the course of where the train tracks should go. Obviously, moving across Nebraska was easy. It was just walking and kind of, plotting out things on a map, and they put down markers every so often. But it was when they got into the Rocky Mountains here and the Sierra Nevada mountains in here that things got, kind of dangerous. They had to find the best way to get around, the best way to get through or go through. And so Judah's men often were dangled from things that looked like swings over cliff walls to plot out courses. None of them died, but they plotted a course that the train tracks were able to follow in the actual building. What Judah was actually plotting out was called the right of way. The right of way was basically the course that the tracks were going to take. Okay. Obviously, this wasn't going to be cheap to build. It came at a huge cost to the government. What they basically did is they paid the two companies, all right, the Central Pacific in the red and the Union Pacific here in the blue, each by the mile for the land or the miles of track that they laid down. It cost roughly $111 million in back then money, which would be billions in today's dollars. I didn't do the calculation this morning. I probably should have. Okay. So they were paid, I think it was $16,000 for a mile on the flatland, $32,000 for a mile of foothills leading up to the mountains, and then $48,000 for a mile in the mountains. Obviously, the more difficult the land, the better the pay. They were also given 5 miles of land, 2.5 miles on each side of the track for each mile of track they laid down. And the railroad owners could do whatever they wanted with that, obviously sell it, build towns on it, train stations, things along those lines. And so the people that ran the Union Pacific, again, the Union Pacific is the blue, and the Central Pacific, which is the red, they got huge amounts of money and were some of the richest Americans at that time. Construction began in 1863, although it really didn't get going until like 1865. And the reason for that is simple. Everyone always like, oh, they needed more men. They had to get people out there. Kind of, yeah. But they also needed the military to protect the railroad workers from the native tribes. And the Civil War was going on, so they waited for the Civil War to end. A lot of the work was done by immigrants. Irish immigrants worked a lot for the Union Pacific. Chinese immigrants worked a lot for the Central Pacific. It was actually seen as cheaper to bring Chinese immigrants across the ocean to work from California on than it was to bring people from the eastern side. That should tell you something about transportation and how important this railroad was. So freedmen also came from the south to work on the Union Pacific side. And obviously some of those Civil War veterans who were now looking for something to do, they hooked on too. They made about $30 a month. Now that was top end. The different kinds of immigrants, they didn't make nearly as much. Chinese immigrants were paid fractionally compared to other people. They did a lot of dangerous work, especially when it came to the mountains. They used black powder and nitroglycerin to blast through the mountains to form tunnels. Those back then were very unstable chemicals, and there were a lot of cave-ins, and a lot of people died. The immigrants especially were given the worst jobs, and if you died while you were building this, your family didn't get anything. They basically got a letter saying that you had died. In 1869, the railroad was finished in Promontory, Utah, which is right there. And they had a last spike ceremony where they took a picture of the trains. They pulled them up cow catcher to cow catcher. Cow catcher is this metal piece off the front. You hit things on the track with it so you don't have to slow down. And they drove in a golden spike with a silver-plated hammer, if I remember correctly. They took a picture. First, they took a picture with all of just the white people. That's the one that becomes famous, goes in the history books. And then they took a picture with everybody who worked on the railroad. This does truly open the West, because now people can get from point A to point B instead of in 6 months, in about 6 to 7 days, which obviously is going to increase the speed at which people are getting west. Okay. Now our last slide for the day. Once people move into the air, once people can get into the area more quickly, there's a need for land. And as the railroads start bringing people west, there's conflict. The idea of conflict is going to be inevitable. There are going to be issues between whites and the native tribes, but there's going to be issues between whites and the people that were already there. And so when whites started to show up in the southwestern part of the country, in the Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, Southern California part of things. They found that there were already people there. Remember that last year when you guys had Mr. Place, we got that land as a result of winning a war with Mexico. And when we got that land, we didn't kick the people off that lived there. We just said, hey, you're Americans now. And most people are like, fine, whatever. As long as we get to keep our land, great. The reality of things is, though, there were not legal deeds or legal paperwork that said that that land belonged to them. They just owned it because they had always owned it. Basically, if you slept there, you owned it. And so when white people showed up in land, they're like, oh my God, that is beautiful over there. I wonder who owns that. They went to the county government, they went to the state government, and they looked up the land, and there was no deed, no piece of paper that said, hey, you own this. And so they went, hey, how much for that chunk of land? And they bought the land out from under the people that lived there. When they bought the land, they got any buildings that were on it, they got the livestock that was on it, and they basically took these people's lives and livelihood. And then they were subjected to racism, the same as the freedmen in the southern part of the country. Things became passed into law that were almost like brown codes, the Latino version of the black codes. The segregation, lower pay, loss of political power, loss of social power, because as the white people moved in, it started to mimic what was happening in the southern part of the country as far as the racism and segregation. And obviously this still impacts life in the Southwest today, because some of the land ownership is still in the hands of the people that came out and bought the land at that time. All right, that was a lot. Guys, enjoy your time, okay? If you want to join that Oregon Trail Challenge, play before 3 o'clock and post your score. Take a screenshot and send it to me. If you are behind, get some work done. Otherwise, please rest. It's a long stretch between Thanksgiving break and Christmas break. I know it doesn't seem like it, but it really is. If you have any questions, please reach out. I will be available all the days. I'm just take a little bit to get back to you, especially if I'm doing things with my family. But otherwise, enjoy your time, behave yourselves, be good. Bye-bye.